welcome to another week. Busy as always, industry news and updates. Things are changing rapidly. I think this is going to be another Mod Podge episode where we just,
breaking news.
Yeah, everything's, happening so quickly now. It's not like a big event happens once a quarter or every few months. It's like things are happening weekly. So it's probably going to be another discussion about 4 or 5 different things happening all at once.
Yeah, why don't you start with kind of, you had a fun week. April was pretty chaotic. It was probably the busiest month that was non-AEP that I can ever remember in the industry with how.
Yeah, I was texting agents and agencies and everything else and in between flights and all that. And I was telling them this is like actually the me, you, Jeff, Brian, Paul. It's like leadership at our company. We have not all been in the office. This is the first day that we've all been in the office for, I think, 6 weeks.
Yep.
Where we were all there. So
and it doesn't slow down much.
It has been really busy with travel, hard to sync up. And so sometimes like there is that, just having a moment to spend an hour or two and sync up on all of our initiatives and everything is hard. But I was out. Thank you, Humana. Shout out. I was out at Churchill Downs, the Derbies this week. I did not get invited to, Saturday to the Derby, but it was a great event. A lot of fun out there. I had not been to first time in Louisville. And first time at the, at Churchill Downs, it was good. Good experience. I
had massive FOMO. So
I did not win any money.
Man, hook me up next year.
I did, yeah. I did not win any money on the horses, but the casino across the river, good job, Indiana. Caesars there. I did win some money there, so that was good.
Yeah, it looked like a good week.
It was. I always say this to everybody. It is a relationship business. Very much value the partnership there with our different carriers, and it more than anything, the event was cool. You like being appreciated, but more than anything, same thing. It's great to spend time with the leadership team. And just have that time with them, FaceTime. It's important.
Yeah, it seems like any time that you've been out of town, pretty significant news and industry happenings have happened while you're out of office.
Call letters, the addendum to the, clarification to the call letter, all these other things. They're always just dropping while I'm traveling, and I'm just
FTC reading. Changes, and then, I was texting you so there's quite a few big pieces of news this week, but we kind of wanted to start by talking about Assurance. I was texting you and
yeah, that's true. Well, and it was always interesting, and like we are not the ones, like I never want to be rumor milling or like fear mongering. We're always kind of like I hear things all the time. I would say almost daily, emails, text messages. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? I very much take this approach of like, let me hear that from 2 or 3 other sources first. Let me dig in a little bit more before I agree with that sentiment. So when that news broke this week, I was like, where did you hear this? What source?
That's funny that you said that, because I had one of our industry contacts pretty high up. I posted something on LinkedIn fairly quick, and she was like, hey, how do you know this? I'm like the news. I don't go off the first person I hear, but once I have 3 trusted news sources,
right,
then I can go. Once I've heard it 3 times from sources that I trust and I know they know what they're talking about, then we can kind of go to market. And we were actually doing our weekly recruiting webinar, and there were people that within minutes kind of had been.
Hey, just since you said that too, and we're going to jump this in. Go ahead and leave it in the podcast, but Matt, you should throw up a link to our weekly, WebEx just on the screen so that if anybody wants to go to that, they definitely can.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah.
So.
We'll also. Reminder to hit the bell, like, and subscribe. Did I say that right, Matt?
Okay. Good job, Mr. Beast.
Especially,
Good job.
Subscribe, hit the bell. So we were doing our weekly recruiting webinar, and it was within minutes of this happening. Some people had kind of joined, and they were talking about looking for a new opportunity because they'd just been kind of, given the letter, and a couple other people reached out. And so it was, probably within an hour of people starting to hear. Before they'd even made official statements, everybody was kind of, out in the streets, kind of spreading the news, before the official word came down. And, of course, on LinkedIn, and we're a part of it, and everybody else, there's lots of, I'd say, blood in the water, blood in the streets, because Assurance had a massive sales force, and we're a fairly significant force in the industry. So
Yeah, and I don't think that it's anything, trade secret or anything I can't disclose. But my understanding in talking to people is that there's been some arrangements where some of those resources and distribution, some of those things are going to go over to health markets, is what it's sounding like, at least from discussions and things I had heard. Now, I granted, I think that every one of those agents is going to have the autonomy and ability to go wherever they want. But I think some of those company resources from Prudential are being moved over to health markets from the sounds of it.
Yeah, and first of all, in case we sound unsympathetic, we very much are sympathetic and sorry for any agents who've made that their career, and to essentially have their career abruptly ended like that kind of does put a lot of people out in the streets in a lurch. And so I think,
well, and candidly, I would add to that too, that I have industry contacts, friends, associations, people like that, I see at a lot of carrier events and we commiserate with, and we have good relationships, and some of those people too, whether they're in their, marketing department or their finance department, wherever they may be too. A lot of great industry people. And I think from our perspective is, we're always saddened to hear about that stuff. At the same time, sometimes presents an opportunity for those people to go somewhere else, and it doesn't feel like an opportunity, but, hopefully they get, into a good role, a new opportunity, and, get on the other side of it and look back.
Yeah, and I do know a lot of agents who had chosen that opportunity as their, way to make an income. Part of it was because of the speed of pay. Part of it was because of their model. And I think there are probably a lot of agents who maybe weren't necessarily financially prepared to have something like that happen. And so, right. We've always known very much about how their model operated, because we have a similar virtual agency structure, although the back end and the financials are all, completely different. But as far as the way that agents were doing business, we've had very similar tech stacks for our agents as well. So we've always known been very familiar with their operation and their business.
Yeah, it is wild. And I haven't had the post conversations yet with any of my contacts there about, what really prompted it. But I mean, a lot of assumptions are being made. Obviously, Prudential had bought them, 4 or 5 years ago. And it was like,
for the low price of $2.4 billion.
With a B. That was just correct. You all heard that. Billions of dollars. And now here they are just a few years later. And apparently I think they were trying to be kind of sold off to somebody else. And I just don't think there was a market or an appetite for it, so that just kind of indicates a couple of things. Number one, that maybe, the technology wasn't maybe what they thought. Maybe it was that their debt structure was high. Maybe it was that their accounts receivable or their cash flow wasn't great. I mean, I don't know. There could be a number of things, but obviously it's also, I would say, a hard environment right now for acquisition for some, because just the interest rate environment too. So that probably played a factor into that as well.
Well, and Prudential's a $40-50 billion market cap company, and so a lot of these things that we'll say are publicly available, right? And we know that Assurance was not profitable for 11 out of the 12 quarters that they were in operation, and they'd net lost about $500 million. And so you go, at what point does a company essentially have to cut off a toxic asset, an asset that's draining the profitability of the company? Yep. And I think, I made a post earlier on some forums, and I talked and I said, I posed the question, is this year the equivalent of the 2008 financial banking crisis? And I didn't mean that to be alarmist or kind of like ring the bell, but I do think that we were talking about the famous Warren Buffett quote, which you never know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out, right? Yep. And I think that this year and the culmination of a lot of these market circumstances are really playing into effect right now, because you have a lot of things that are happening very quickly right now. And overall, I do think the short answer with the Assurance deal is the acquisition cost, the cost to acquire the business, and the LTV, the lifetime value of those policies, were not appropriate, right? It was too expensive.
And the other thing too is lead volume, right? The FCC rule. And I think that Assurance was also creating a significant amount of revenue too from generating, obviously utilizing their own leads that they're generating, but also selling off leads too.
Correct.
And I think that,
and specifically inbound call transfers, live call transfers.
Right.
And that market's been massively disrupted over the past 3 months.
Right. And candidly, that was another part that I'm sure dipped their revenue too or at least the outlook doesn't look positive either. So it's kind of like, well, here's the current today. What does the next quarter look like? What do the next 2 quarters look like? And what does the next year look like? And when it's not rosy and the outlook is the same or worse, I'm sure that's what.
Yeah, I think if I'm Prudential and I'm looking at what the next 12 to 36 months looks like, and I go, there's some headwinds there already, and yet we haven't been profitable over the past 3 years. So, what are we doing here?
And I'm going to pose the question out there too. There's going to be a lot of other organizations too that could be in the same fate. Look, I know organizations, and I'm trying not to name names, but there's organizations out there that are carrying debt and aren't profitable. And I always sit there and go, okay, that's great. I'm somewhat faulted as being, like I'm extremely conservative. I hold capital. We kind of have this very sustainable growth. I've been very low key over these last years. Bootstrap, like we don't have investors. We don't have any debt. We don't take on capital. And I've just been very, very, very conservative. But at the same time, it's because like debt, you have to factor in like the risk that comes with debt. And the same thing is it leaves people very exposed. Like anytime you have all the debt and you're not making profitability and you're just growing, at some point, when you start to have those ripples in your industry or in the economy, then those people that are the most exposed are the first to go. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that the conservative nature, we can say we know where that comes from. It's genetic.
Yeah. It is genetic.
We have a famously frugal father who he's a classic stick the money under the mattress and kind of guy. So that definitely has its benefits, and we have always been lucky to be financially sound and prudent and grow, not on debt, not on things like that, but on our baked stable residual income. And you've always been very smart and prudent to do that with the business.
Operating cash flow.
Yep, for sure.
So we've been good there. And anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. So not to, kind of belabor the point, and we're all just hypothesizing here, right? Like we don't have any actual inside information of to what's happened with Assurance. It sure is a big entity that was influential, had a lot of agents, wrote a lot of apps, wrote a lot of business.
But again, I can mirror that same situation of not profitability and everything else and size and large institutions and other people who are in the same boat. And they're not making money either. And I kind of question and go, well, when all the market factors and were great over these last couple of years, and they were just, again, not, paying off debt and not being, what I would say like fiscally responsible with that and just putting it into more and more and more. Well, now it's not to say it's a house of cards, but there's other organizations out there that aren't making money, and then the outlook looks a lot worse. So I don't know how they're going to do it either. So
yeah,
there's some really some CFOs that are absolute geniuses maybe, but I don't know how they're going to make it work.
Well, so two things for me is I go, yes, is this a canary in the coal mine type of thing? It's a bellwether of maybe things to come like in the market, because if you said, you looked at these big e-telebrokers in our marketplace and you started listing them off and said, which one of these would you guess would go under first? Assurance would not have been my first bet, kind of to your point, and again, we don't have any inside knowledge or anything. We're just making assumptions based on publicly available,
right,
data and things like that. And I do think that, like I said, when is this possibly our industry's 2008 financial crisis? I think there are business models that were grown and established that maybe weren't necessarily always the DNA of those business models weren't sound for long term. And I think those things are going to be challenged. And as we have we'll go through and talk about some of these other things going on in the industry too. And I think real market principles and real financial business finances apply.
Well, yeah, and this isn't like a financial podcast. Like, I could start doing that because it's like a hobby and I like it. I had aspirations of being an economics major, dropped out. But I will say that look at even like the Pelotons of the world or DoorDash, and look at all these other companies over these last couple of years that during COVID, they absolutely, it was to the moon just because it was different. And companies started behaving like that was the new normal. And that's how it was always going to be. And there wasn't any of this actual realization of like, hey, let's take these wins and take these capitals and let's pull back and have some more sustainable growth paths. They were just like, again, foot on the gas. That's how it's always going to be. And that's not a realistic outlook. And so I think and we'll talk about that more and more.
And that's my point of like saying, hey, it's kind of indicative or similar to the 2008 financial crisis, because there were a lot of people who had real estate houses of cards, lenders who were lending and doing, financial practices that
stated income.
Correct. That weren't necessarily economically sound. It was this environment that was not aligned with true long-term business principles and reality. And that's what I'm talking about. And I don't want to sound, Chicken Little or alarmist. I am sounding like, hey, because ultimately I think there's going to be lots of opportunity.
Yeah.
And a good resetting of a lot of things that needed to happen for our industry to get back to sustainability and ultimately good practice.
Yeah, and healthcare has always been tough too, and we'll talk about some of the other big things in the news this week too. We'll transition to that, but healthcare has always been hard simply because of the regulations too, with insurance companies and the regulations from government, the parameters about MLRs, and how 85 cents on the dollar has to go into actual core benefits, and you're working with 15 cents on the dollar that you can use for pretty much everything else. I mean, our industry has always been challenging that way. And the companies who have done well are the ones that have been able to take those profits, do more vertical integration, and also hold a lot more on their balance sheet and get more assets instead of, they may not be that sexy because they're not giving out huge dividends and huge profitability. But the insurance carriers that have done well over time have done that very slowly.
Yep, absolutely. So let's kind of talk about transition to maybe the next most large or impactful thing, and that's Walmart announcing that they're closing their actual health clinics, which is again was pretty surprising considering that's been a big expansion and recently is 2023.
Been a big push for them to continue to grow it.
Yeah, they announced they were going to open 81 more stores or whatever it was. They currently have 51 of those clinics open.
Yep.
And they closed all of them.
I'm not cheating. I'm not looking, but I remember it's Florida, Texas. Is it Alabama, Georgia? I know I think they're mostly spread among three bigger states, like Florida, Texas, especially. But just a handful of states, all in the South, is where those Walmart clinics are. And I actually will say I like on premise. I really like the model. They were trying to be in for the most part underserved communities. Mm-hmm. They were trying to offer like even cash prices. For people, for people to come in and they did have like their own labs in-house, so you didn't have to outsource or send off your blood work to Quest or LabCorp or whatever else. Right there on the spot, they had their own imaging and diagnostic there, and so they had made huge and significant investments into these healthcare centers. And I know when people think about Walmart, they think like. I think about like the cheap grungy floor when I go in there and it's, dirty and like
people of Walmart.
Well, like you kind of think about that, but at the same time, these Walmart facilities though were actually beautiful and they were really clean and they had great technology and they were all really new.
Correct. Well, and a lot of times in certain communities, the Walmart is the lifeblood. I mean, they're the hub of the community, especially in some of these more rural or underserved communities. They really are the a delivery mechanism for cheap, groceries and products and things like that. And so I think idealistically,
it's a cornerstone of the community in a lot of places.
Exactly, you're right. And so they had the right idea and concept, but I just, again, think it talks to some of the changes in the market conditions, and we'll continue to talk about this.
But here's one thing though that I will tell you though that's different about a retail business versus our business and in healthcare. If you're a provider and you're billing payers, the cash flow is very different too. Like, and I know like retail, you're going to have to buy products, you're going to have to hold inventory, you're going to have to do that, but it's like you're making these transactions and immediately like you're trying to come up with supply chain efficiencies to try to go from acquiring the product to selling the product and getting paid. And with, our industry, if you're a provider and you're having to work with all these different payers and send off billing, and your cycle to collect payment is months sometimes. And so you're having to sit there and hold like these massive accounts receivable while you're having to have this heavy investment and capital intensive, model that you're running. And so it looks completely different than retail.
Yep, absolutely.
So.
I want to just read this, this statement that they put out about it. It said, "This is a difficult decision, and like others, the challenging reimbursement environment and escalating operating costs create a lack of profitability that make the care business unsustainable for us at this time," the company said in a statement. And so again, it's just one more example of increasing costs
Input,
of care.
output.
Yep. And especially, if you think about some of these Walmart clinics, how difficult it would be to get a primary, doctors there, nurses, healthcare staffing, and the cost of those people, and then to try to get them to go move to, these outskirt type areas and communities and be able to service those, I bet it's been very difficult for them.
What the biggest thing that's going on, increasing costs, is really the thing. So it all stems back to, if you really think about all of this, like the stimulus money, and I mean, government's been printing money for a long, long time. Like, unfortunately, and I'm probably not the person to go into like monetary policy. We would have to have a different podcast guest for that. But they printed so much money over these last couple of years, and what it really has ramped up inflation. And so then you do have people saying, my living wage needs to be so much higher.
Yep.
Labor market's really tight, and trying to find healthcare workers, that's just one piece that's become a lot more expensive. What you had to pay people to work and perform services back 2, 3, 4 years ago is different now. So labor's way up. And then really, okay, AI is so cool. We hear everything about AI and how much better it's going to be and how much cooler our life is going to be. But guess what? The AI that we have right now is not operating at its efficiency or level that it could be. It's kind of hit or miss. And guess what? It's really expensive. And so like all these cool, greatest technologies that we have right now are not doing what we hope they would. There's still going to be this phase for the next 5, 10, 15 years to really get it to efficiency. And at the meantime, the technology is expensive, the compliance is expensive, systems and CRMs and everything else that they're using is expensive. To buy the equipment is expensive. It's all these costs. And even think about healthcare, when you're having to ship units and shipping costs and all, it's all through the roof. And then so when you have this disconnect of, hey, we're having lower reimbursements in the future, those things they don't align. So I completely understand, the why.
So everybody in the industry right now is fighting for profitability, right? They're fighting off these market conditions, the providers, the clinics, the things like that, the insurers right now, and there's all these all these forces that are
there's two things happening too, and this is something that is like I'm always looking ahead at, okay, this year, this quarter, next year, but I'm looking ahead 5 years even right now, and here's what to me is. Again, hey, someone can always call me on these podcasts and tell me I was wrong. I will be the first. If I'm ever wrong, I'll publicly admit it. Just like on, is it Billy Madison, where he's like, you were right, I was wrong. I am ugly and you are good looking.
Yeah.
Where's the Happy Gilmore?
Yeah, exactly.
I will do that if I'm ever wrong. But there's also insurance companies out there right now and provider groups. There's larger entities, whether you're on the payer side or you're on the provider side. There's huge entities out there right now who, as this disruption is happening, they're licking their chops though too. Mm-hmm. And there's opportunities where they're going to be picking up membership and growth, pennies on the dollars, and they have the balance sheets to do this. And I think that they're going to be in this reimbursement environment, again, whether you're a provider or a carrier or payer, they're looking at some of these people in the challenging environment, and they're going to significantly expand membership or growth this year or next year. And then 5 years from now, they're just such behemoths that people are going to have a hard time even being able to compete with them. And they're going to go, how did this happen? How did we get here?
Yeah. So in other words, further roll up, further consolidation, further conglomeratization of the healthcare industry is in the future, for sure.
That is, and these environments like this are the exact moments where you just 2x, 5x, 10x that pattern or what was already naturally occurring. It's just going to be exacerbated. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's just, it is very indicative. There's another Warren Buffett quote where it's like, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful type of thing. And when I'm comparing it to the 2008 financial and banking crisis, there are definitely people who were able to maximize and take advantage of those situations, who were better prepared, better structured. And, of course, companies can't always, have a crystal ball and know. And a lot of the things that we're talking about, like Dan said, I do believe are going back in alignment with a lot of the unrealistic market conditions that surfaced during COVID,
right,
when there was ridiculous amounts of money being printed, healthcare costs were not being utilized. There was people were too scared to go to the doctor.
Carriers were getting 4, 4.5, 5-star ratings with not a lot of oversight on the criteria. So they were getting overpayments and they weren't auditing the payments. It was just like, let's just get money out to the market. Let's solve it. Let's just throw money at it. Let's, get people care. It was,
and there were a lot of these.
Telehealth too was another thing. It was like to the moon,
Correct.
Everybody telehealth. It was a race to get into telehealth. And now that's one of those things too, that is very much, I would guess, in the pooper. I haven't looked, but I would guess.
Yeah. Well, you saw, these business models that spun up. You had the printing of money. You had, we're dealing with the exorbitant inflation that we've had over the past a couple of years that still seems to be going up, but on the healthcare side of things too. And so this is some of the things that we were talking about even during the pandemic is, well, yeah, everyone's scared to get COVID, but when Mima's not going to the doctor times 1 million, times a couple million all across the country. And now what are we dealing with escalating costs and utilization? We have healthcare conditions in this country that have been significantly exacerbated over the past 3 to 4 years.
And you have conditions that weren't getting treated from a preventive perspective.
Exactly.
And now you have people that are getting stage 2, stage 3, late stage cancers and, these health conditions that would have been far more manageable.
Correct. And people who were critical of some of the COVID policies at the time, a baby with the bathwater type approach, we're dealing with increased, mental health care situations. Obesity in the country is absolutely rampant and has increased, exponentially over the past 3 to 4 years.
Yep.
You have these conditions, people weren't getting their preventive measures done, like Dan said. And so we're dealing with the aftermath and the fallout of these multiple market forces that are driving these healthcare costs up. And anytime that things like this happen in the market, there's got to be adjustments, right? And and that's what we're going through right now. And again, ultimately, it's healthy, it's good. It's just part of a free market economy in our healthcare system, and there's some corrections that need to be made.
Yep. So, also we noted only once quickly, but Kano, they fell over the last 6 to 12 months. I can't remember exactly when. I think it was Centerwell that gobbled them up, but I wouldn't be surprised if the people who run Walmart are smart. They're smarter than I am. They're extremely intelligent. They know what they're doing. I think they have alternate plans for some of those centers. I'm not going to be at liberty to say right now, but I have my suspicions as to what I think they're going to do with those facilities, shall we say. We'll connect after the podcast to think if you think what I think, but they're not stupid. They're smart. This is not going to be they're not going to take a big L, but I will say that I think there's going to be other providers who are going to be dropping, getting squeezed because of this reimbursement environment too. And I think that we're going to see, again, more of these to come before the end of the year and especially into next year. I think there's a lot of organizations that are putting on a brave face and they're going to keep weathering as long as they can. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're making announcements about different provider groups, falling left and right next year.
Yeah. So interesting. Again, like you said, I think Walmart is not stupid. This is not going to be the end of them in the healthcare industry or in the insurance industry at all. I do think they're just kind of retooling and going to reallocate and reload for a different strategy that is going to make sense more long-term. But that's kind of a good, parlay. There's a couple other things that we could talk about. Before we get into kind of Aetna, because there's two pieces of that I wanted to talk about with the Hella Health and and then their stock today. But I wanted to talk about,
because they're announced.
Yeah. The other thing is that we've talked about before on the podcast is the Change Health with United Healthcare and all the aftermath of that, because still, as of today's date, May 2nd, we still don't have, Medicaid eligibility lookup functioning like it was before.
I had a good Humana source tell me that they thought it was going to be back up in 6 weeks.
From today? Because
from
I
today.
hear every day that it's going to be any day now.
I hear 6 weeks, and that was yesterday.
So a couple of things as the fallout from that has kind of, more kind of clearly come into alignment, because we're almost 2 months removed from that now. United Health Group is saying that cost them a loss of $1.6 billion already. That hack between, having to make some payments to providers and some bridge loan type payments.
Well, first of all, the ransom they had to pay.
Yeah, the ransom. Yeah, which who knows how much that was.
It was the ransom. It was paying the lost revenue from the providers, lost services, probably
having to rebuild the entire tool,
and probably some, I would imagine, breach of contract or inability to provide services. I would imagine somewhere in there. So
yeah, and we have been a Change Health customer using and utilizing and trying to pay for that tool in the past.
We've attempted for like 9 months.
So,
we're joking about that because we signed up, and we never could even get across from implementation because they were just so chaotic.
So we love United Healthcare. We absolutely do. Obviously they are what they are for a reason, but our experience in dealing with Change when they got hacked, I was like, you don't say, huh? Such a crack shot organization and such great practices are hacked, huh? Yeah. So a couple things fall out from that. Obviously, a $1.6 billion massive loss. Everybody in the industry, all other carriers have had a difficult time verifying Medicaid eligibility specifically. And so I think that ultimately, hopefully, another tool comes out of it that's better, and another competitor, because the government was also kind of saying they wanted to make United kind of divest that portion of their business, going, this is too many eggs in one basket type of thing.
That's the result of my conversations with multiple different carriers has been look, we were all dependent upon it. We all were, especially, obviously with and let's be honest, the D-SNP population's growing, and we're going to get more and more delineation of products between partial duals and full duals. And if you're a broker out there listening, you know how challenging it is sometimes to know which product to put somebody on. It's really hard.
Yep.
And we all want to do good business, and we don't want RFIs. We don't want pended business. We want to, be transparent and offer the right plan to a consumer. We don't want to be lying, but it's a pretty hard environment right now to even know, like, oh, hey, based on this information, I'm seeing it in the system, this is what you qualify for.
Correct.
It's you're just shooting in the dark guessing, and so it's been tough.
One thing, I will take this opportunity to give a shout out to our friends at WellCare Centene. They are, anytime we can give them some shine, they have been the best at going through this and being able to go through eligibility for your clients. So if you're a broker out there and you're aligned with WellCare, call WellCare's helpline, because they've been able to do a really good job really quickly. And why is that, Dan? Why is Centene able to verify eligibility faster, better, and easier than some of these other carriers?
They've ramped up 4 times. They shifted resources from other departments into that eligibility line, knowing they were going to do that. And it's also because they're the biggest holder of CAID contracts in the country. So people don't know that Centene actually has more state Medicaid contracts than anybody else.
37, correct?
Yeah.
They're managing
something like that.
Close to that. So they're actually the ones managing those Medicaid networks. So they have access to those eligibilities because, it's just they
have the contract.
They're managing it. Yeah, they're managing those state contracts. So shout out, to Centene and WellCare, and a tip for you brokers. If you're trying to get some eligibility verified on Medicaid status, they're the best ones right now. They're faster.
Yep. But we are all hoping, and to your point, the takeaway from a lot of the carriers has been like, wow, it was easy for us to just spend the money and go through Change to get this, but now this makes us gives us caution, makes us pause and think about, we ought to invest the money ourselves into building our own tool, just so that we're not dependent on somebody else, because this has not just affected, obviously it's $1.6 billion estimated for United Healthcare, but it's cost a lot of these other carriers a significant amount of money too.
Yep. I mean, our overall, we do a lot of dual business, and our overall sales have definitely been, a
Well,
little bit affected by having lack of eligibility.
There's about a 20% margin of our overall sales that are impacted by this. And when I say 20%, maybe half of that we can actually resolve, fix, and, put some extra time into verification and trying to get them qualified for a plan or something like that. So at the end of the day, the outcome is probably like a loss in about 10% of our sales right now from that.
Yeah.
And, you add that month over month over month for a few months, and that hurts anybody. And that's just me being pretty open and transparent as a business owner to those listening out there. Yeah, it even sucks for us. I mean, it cost us money.
Yeah,
it still is.
So ultimately, it's been a financial impact to everybody in the industry, but at the end of the day, it's really hurt consumers. It's hurt them getting access to the plans they need to getting put on proper, dual plans in that care model. It's hurt people getting their medications verified, but doctors being able to bill. So it's been, very impactful. And so I do hope that, again, anytime there's pain.
Doesn't that make you look forward to next year when duals can change every month again?
No, it does not. Or when there's more different plans that are more specialized and there's even more levels of eligibility, when I'm like, we already have a hard time verifying what we currently have, let alone we're going to have more plan variability. If
you were to, not just our brokers, but throughout the country, if you were to ask people and quiz them, do you know the difference between a QDWI, an LIS level 4, a SlimB, a QuimB, or a QuimB Plus? Do you think anybody can tell you, how many brokers could tell you the difference?
3% of brokers.
I would say maybe 2%, but yes. So if you're starting to put more delineation and levels in there too, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, so hopefully a new sophisticated tool. So, again, just all sorts of interesting stuff going on in the industry. And let's kind of, final piece of industry kind of situation. Aetna?
Yeah, we should. And I don't know where we're at on time because, it was said 23 degrees Celsius on our timer. So,
Okay. Yeah, we're coming towards right up on time here. So, Aetna had a couple of pieces of news. A good, something pretty positive and then something pretty negative, which was, they did announce that they're acquiring Hella Health. Is it Hela? Hella? That sounds like,
I'll be honest,
like my kids talk, like, oh, that's hella cool,
right.
Whatever. Maybe they're just.
I'll be candid.
Really
you're gonna have to carry that part of the dialogue because I was traveling, so I did not read up on the acquisition. I'm not familiar with them, to be honest.
Yeah, so surprisingly, I'm not super familiar with Hella Health. I do know that they're like a virtual or e-broker based out of New York, and essentially CVS Aetna acquired an FMO or a distributor or broker partner, which is interesting because, again, it's another carrier acquiring another sales arm, another distribution arm.
Well, it's kind of following, though, what we see from vertical integration from United Healthcare, who owns Health Markets, and they own Golden Outlook, and you have now Humana that owns IFG, and so you're just seeing these carriers. But again, it goes back to the call letter probably and what their strategy is going to be in going to market with distribution. Yep. I would imagine.
So that without being able to speak too intelligently on that, that's the interesting piece of it to me is that. Even post call letter, they finished and finalized and closed that acquisition. Who knows? Maybe it was too far down the road to make a sense. But one of the things we'd supposed or hypothesized when we first read the call letter was that we do think that carriers are going to have a more vertically aligned distribution strategy, and acquiring FMOs or distribution or things like that probably makes sense for a lot of them. So that was interesting. And then the other piece was, Aetna's stock had the largest single-day drop since 2009.
Yep.
Dropped 18% in one day.
So just think of that. So they had a drop of their stock by 18%. So, 18% of their overall market cap in a day, and they haven't had a drop like that in 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
and that was massive. Immediately due on their Q1.
My biggest thing on their
results.
Financials, so hey, shout out to Jared Strock too, if you follow his stuff on LinkedIn. And by the way, Jared, you still owe me a call back to come on to the podcast. But anyways, he had a great insight on it. The two things that stuck out to me, and I am a nerd, I listen to through my Seeking Alpha, I like listen to transcripts and the earnings calls. And
Jared does put out the best
yeah.
analysis that's easy to digest, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll listen to a 2-hour financials, like a quarterly call, and you can read his post in 3 minutes or 2 minutes and have a pretty good understanding of it. So I really like how easy it is. But I will say the two things that stood out to me was that their operating cash was down by 34%, which is just freaking
brutal,
massive.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the other thing that stuck out to me was their MLR, like their how it jumped up to 90%, which is just brutal. I don't know, so, don't quote me. I think UHC is down like 85 or 84, something like that, ish, around there. They're at 90. I mean, when you're talking a difference of 5 percentage points in our industry, that is huge.
Yep.
2% is big. 5% is just massive.
Yeah, that was pretty shocking. And it was interesting, too, because Aetna also put out a correction on one of their Medicare Advantage benefits, the health. They had that reimbursement for a physical health device or health product, and they put out a clarification that you couldn't use it no longer for certain things. And I think that was one of these benefits that they were just getting massive utilization on, that they were kind of trying to pump the brakes on as they're seeing high utilization throughout this year.
I agree.
And almost kind of like setting the tone for next year. I'd be very, that benefit was extremely popular this year, and I would be very surprised if they're maintaining or sustaining that next year.
With all that being said, though, I want to hedge and add some commentary, though, to say that I would not bet against Aetna.
Correct.
And I would say that they're a massive, massive company, and CVS does know what they're doing as well. And I always talk about like the big three in the insurance space, and they're one of the big three. And they, ever since they started really making a splash and even started, buying like Oak Street and a bunch of these other providers, I mean, they're really going towards that path of more and more vertical integration. They have plenty of balance sheets. They have plenty of receivables. They're
huge growth last year, huge MA growth.
It's actually, for those people who are investors, it was a great buying opportunity. If you look at it that way and say, hey, they dropped 18% in a day, that's a way overreaction.
I'm going to buy some. This is not financial advice. Not financial advice. Don't ever trust what I say.
Yeah, you may have already missed some of the uptick. I don't know. I haven't even checked today, but I would just say that I think obviously that was an overreaction to them, like missing a beat on earnings. Because again, they're just one of those companies that is going to find a way to be great and to solve the problem and to be profitable. And they have a lot of assets on their balance sheet, and they can just sit there and they're companies like others that I've mentioned that can just weather the storm. Mm-hmm. Like they're in a bad, short-term reimbursement environment. And look, to your point, we don't want this to be Chicken Little, because it's not. Things are not all bad. It's just there's going to be companies that are going to fare better over the next year or two, and get on the other side of things, and it'll look very different.
Yeah, absolutely. So the purpose of this podcast and talking about these things in the news is, one, obviously for our industry friends and people listening to just kind of like, hear some thoughts and opinions and takes, and for, hopefully it's easily to digest for the agents, but ultimately these podcasts are for our agents.
Yep.
And let me just say that 95% of this stuff doesn't even affect you. It doesn't even hit your radar. Right. It doesn't affect the independent agent, the Main Street agent out there working to try to help beneficiaries. And if anything, these type of industry changes and knowledge, we're telling you about them so you can find opportunities and strategies to go forward, because that's ultimately why we do this and what we're talking about this for. And that's what we're helping our agents with, is where are the gold nuggets in this? Where are the opportunities on the horizon in all of these changes? And how do you keep evolving your business and your strategy to maximize these things and continue to grow your business?
Yeah. And also think about this too, to kind of, I know, not to like kind of wrap it up in a positive, we don't want it to be doom and gloom all the time, but, candidly, look, it's felt crowded. If you're a broker out there who's been in a lot of these communities and basically, I bet you Medicarians, it was funny this year because there were so many people who attended versus last year. It was like this culmination in this call letter, and more anxiety and more, consternation over this call letter. And you can almost feel it, like the energy, like the anxiety or the concern from all the agents. But ultimately, think about it this way. I do think that we are, over the next year or two, if you're one of the people kind of built for this, if you can kind of get through these challenging years, I think you're going to get a lot of competition weeded out of the industry. Yep. I really do. And I mean that I think we're already seeing some lead aggregators having like a really challenging time, and we're already seeing like all the cracks in the foundation from them, and they're going to have a harder selling audience of people, this fall. And then I also think from these big e-telebrokers, we're already seeing some reprieve a little bit there, like the Assurance IQ, and I think we're going to see more of that to come. And even if people don't go out of business, I think that they're not going to have the cash flow that they used to just spend into oblivion on Joe Namath ads or whatever the new and improved compliant ads are. So I think some of that is going to be weeded out, some of that competition. And then look, the weekend warrior agents, like if you're listening and you tune into our podcast all the time, we talk about this all the time, you need to be a real freaking professional. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I think about other industries that can be similar. Real estate, you're a pharmaceutical rep, you're a commercial insurance agent or something like that. These are professionals,
financial consultants,
who actually, who go to get CEs, who go to different seminars and training, and who need to be very knowledgeable experts in order to provide value to their clients. And those are the ones that are winning. And I think that if you're listening and that's you're in a good spot, as long as you're not being lazy and you're content to just have your book of a couple hundred clients and sit around and, I don't know, I joke about like Ron White, like sitting in your underwear and eating Cheetos all day. If you're willing to be out there working and being a professional, then you're going to come out ahead of this, because I think a lot of the weekend warriors, the agents who are like, oh, hey, it's September 22nd. I think I better do my AHIP, and oh yeah, ACA too. I better get my FFM done, and now I'm going to go sell and make my $50,000 for the year these next 3 months.
Yeah, and add it to my residuals. Yep.
Those days are just not here, and we say it till I'm blue in the face, but like, ultimately, I think those agents are going to start to get like very much weeded out, and hopefully there's better opportunity for those of us who are sticking around.
Yeah, good point. My final thoughts, just to drive it home, is like you said, we have been crying and about the Joe Namath ads and the misleading national ads. Those are all gone and done. There's some changes going. The call stuff, the massive international call centers beating the hell out of consumers all day, every day. That stuff's getting, starting to get weeded out of the industry. Well, so there's some. And
you have to understand too that those call centers typically existed, those BPOs offshore existed because here onshore, it was usually a big partner who needed to establish a tier one kind of system or agent. And they go, oh, how much is labor here in the U.S.? Oh, it's X amount of dollars per seat or per hour. Oh, it's cheaper. I'm going to go hire and outsource to somebody in another country, offshore, and then I'm going to route that business back here. And so I think that those entities weren't out there just spinning up and existing out there. They were created by entities here onshore.
Correct. And two things for me to wrap. Those BPO, especially those international guys, I get contacted by 5 to 10 of those a day, spamming my phone, email, LinkedIn. Not interested, bro. Not buying. Your days are done, and I can't say I'm sad to see you go.
Yeah, they need to go back to their African Prince emails that they were doing to people or something.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And the final thing is, so for you agents who have been crying and complaining about some of these things that needed to be fixed in the industry, those things are happening. But now this is our moment. This is your moment as an agent to go back and add value and find a way to get in front of consumers that's compliantly and grow a good, stable book of business, because this is our moment where we can take back some of the good aspects of the business.
Yep. And you're finally getting some of the things that you wanted.
Yep.
You've been crying for, and they have heard you. But now some of this pain about extra compliance and having to file your advertising pieces in advance, and you can't just make generic marketing, and you can't just go willy-nilly make whatever. These are a lot of the results, so that is always a double-edged sword. So now just understand that in full context, that now that you've been crying for intervention and to solve these things, and it's happened, I also don't want to hear you complaining now about all the compliance and things that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So, you got to take it all collectively, the good with the bad, you know?
Everything's been leveled. Everything's been level set. Now it's time for those who are going to rebuild and and set themselves up to have a good next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
So
now we're vault people from Fallout.
Exactly. Right? Coming out of the vault, ready to build the new world. Yep. What it's going to look like. So, hey, thanks guys. Appreciate you listening. Again, subscribe on YouTube. And if you wouldn't mind, he says ring the bell, whatever it means on subscribe on YouTube.
And by the way, Mike and I personally do, I actually get a little bit of enjoyment moderating the comment section. I actually am the one who sometimes pops on and replies to people. So candidly, it's not like an AI bot or anything else. So if you have any feedback or actual commentary, then go ahead and, put in a comment. I'll reply.
Our web link's in the description down below. We'll put it in there for you as well. Like Dan's saying, comments on YouTube help. Our algorithm help it. If you think we're right, wrong, want to argue with us, tell us we're stupid, we don't know what we're talking about. We'd love to read it. Anything helps, anything positive, just comment there. And then on Apple and Spotify, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review on that, we'd appreciate it. I know that there's one troll that left us a 1-star review on Apple, and I'm like,
there's trolls on the internet.
What did we say? What did we say that merits 1 star? At least type something out and back up what you're saying. So
probably offended him.
Yes, it was probably a competitor that was like, these guys don't know what they're talking about.
Anyways, all right,
appreciate
y'all.
you.